Hello and welcome back to Eternal Spring. I am Paul Thrott. I'm here as always with my wife Stephanie. Long time no
Hi.
see. Today we'd like to speak on some of the issues with Mexico. So we did a video about why we chose Mexico and specifically Mexico City and Roma Norte. Um, but it's not perfect, right? So it makes sense for a lot of reasons, but there are issues. And for us, these issues so far have been surmountable, I guess. And they are not outweighed by the pros. But I think it's important to discuss the cons as well. So these are specific to us. Obviously, they're specific to our situation as well. So it's Mexico, but Mexico City and Roma Norte in particular.
Mhm.
So the first one is altitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Altitude is not something that I found people talked about
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot before we first went to Mexico City. And, you hear about it with places like Denver and cities in Colorado. And,
Mm-hmm.
Mexico City is, it's high altitude. It's up there. That's part of what makes the climate so nice, but it also makes it a little more fatiguing, especially in your first couple of days, a little harder to breathe.
Yep.
When you land in the airport, you walk quite a distance to, you
Yeah.
know, to or through baggage
Welcome to
claim and
Mexico.
then onto passport control.
Yeah.
And then after you get out of the secure area, out to where you can get a taxi or an Uber and
Mm-hmm.
you feel it, especially, you're maybe carrying a backpack or rolling a bag and you've just gone from, sea level to 65,
7,400 feet.
7,400 feet.
74. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it for the first couple
Going
days.
up the stairs is impossible.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just to put it in perspective, I want to say Denver's probably in the 5,000 to 5,500 feet altitude. I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I lived was about 6,000 feet. Mexico City is about 7,400. It's brutal.
Hmm.
So
You do, I think you adjust after the first 2 or 3 days on a trip. You start to get a little bit more acclimated to it,
yeah, but
but
then you go
it's
running up those
different.
stairs and
Yeah.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
and
Yep. Hmm.
yeah. Okay. That's just something to know about. Like she said, you'll get over it over time, but it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks on day one for sure. Speaking of hitting you like a ton of bricks, number two is food poisoning.
Yeah, I will have to say that it's hard to avoid it. One
Mm-hmm.
thing I try to do every time we go to Mexico is make sure we take a couple of Pepto-Bismol tablets with every meal, kind of proactively.
Right.
I read it somewhere, may or may might be all in my head, but I feel like that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
prepares your system for the either the
Well,
germs or the spicy food that you're going to eat. But I don't
how
always
well
remember.
how well is it
Uh,
prepared our system? So
so I don't always remember, and I would say most trips we at least get a little bit of food poisoning. And
interesting.
in the March trip, we were kind of each down for the count for a solid day, not the
Yep,
same day.
that's right. Yeah, I would say I think I've been to Mexico 7 times maybe in the past year, and you must, I guess, 8 for you because you went that other time with Kelly. And I think I've had food poisoning 3 times.
Hmm.
And when I say 3 times, I'm talking 3 times where I lost a day.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
beyond that, the last time I remember having food poisoning was when Mark was a baby, so 24 years ago ish. And then 3 times in the past year. So it's there's something going on for
Hmm.
sure. Um,
Yeah. My count is I'm counting in just kind of
mhm.
maybe feeling a little bit off.
Okay.
So I think I'm defining food poisoning a little bit more broadly, but and I wouldn't say it's always, you never know what it is because you could get food poisoning,
That's right.
from 2 hours to 2 days after you've eaten whatever it is. So
Yep.
you kind of always want to look back and say, well, what was it that caused it? And you really can never tell. It
Mhm.
could be just sometimes the spicier food, the diet that's not the same diet that you're eating at home.
Yeah, but it could be eggs that are not pasteurized or homogenized or whatever. It
Yep.
could be you ate street food and the guacamole was sitting out in the sun for 8 hours.
Hmm.
It's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
I will say
never
that
know.
I feel like we're more inclined to eat the food that we want to eat and drink the drinks we want to drink and take our chances with food
Yeah.
poisoning. I know
Yeah.
there are people who, don't eat any. salad, don't eat
Hmm.
any, don't have ice in
Or
their
don't eat street
drinks, don't
food.
eat any street food.
Yep.
We do all those things. So I
Yep.
think we probably are putting ourselves at higher risk for food poisoning, but we're also eating and drinking foods that are
Yeah.
part of the experience.
Yeah. And this sounds goofy, but I also feel like there's an element of training your body a bit. We'll never conquer it 100%. But I think if you introduce this, whatever it is, to your body a little bit at a time, over time, hopefully it won't be as bad over time.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
another great unscientific idea of mine. Okay, so number three, related to number two, is the water. There's this myth that you can't drink the water in Mexico, and it's not a myth.
Right. Yeah, you can't drink the water in Mexico. And I think one thing that a lot of people who haven't visited Mexico don't realize is Mexicans don't drink the water either.
That's
Everybody
right.
buys typically these 5 gallon bottles of water that you can set up in your home, like the type of thing you might have in an
Yeah,
office here in the United States.
Garifone. Yeah.
Yeah, Garrafone. Um, if not that, for example, we don't have that yet in our apartment, but we'll bring home, I don't know, a 2 gallon bottle of water at a time, and
Hmm.
that's what you use for your drinking, for your cooking, preparing food. Anything like the even if the water is clean when it leaves wherever it leaves to get to your house, there's no guarantee that it's not
Right.
picking anything up in the pipes on the way there. So,
It's
um,
worse than that because you could test the water. Like at our place, imagine we did a test of the water, and someone said, "Oh, it's perfectly fine. It's healthy. You can drink it. There are no problems whatsoever." That doesn't mean that that's going to be the case in 2 days, or 2 weeks, or 2 years. The pipe system in all of Mexico, including Mexico City, are ancient. Metals are leaching into the water. All kinds of terrible things. So even a safe, rating today doesn't. You just can't drink the water.
yeah. Hmm.
Period. Yeah.
You can buy water's cheap. You can buy bottles of water.
Yes.
It's
And it's
not a
delivered.
factor of the cost, and you can have it
Yep.
delivered. Um, but there is it's one more thing to take care of when you're there. You don't want to go to bed without any water for the morning. You want to make
Right.
sure you have
Right.
water on hand all the time.
Changes a few things logistically. You have to wash vegetables with a special um, cleaning solution, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
and soak them and so forth. And then we brush our teeth. Some people won't brush their teeth with the water here. We do, but we spit it out. We don't swallow any of the water when we in the
Hmm.
process of brushing our teeth.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe that caused we
Yes,
have
that
no
could be
idea.
the food
Maybe that was the
poisoning.
food. But yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's no way
Hmm.
to know.
Yep.
So that one's real for sure. Okay, so what are we on now? Number four is noise.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. Mexico is noisy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we even in our neighborhood, which I would say is a relatively quiet neighborhood,
Yep.
you hear traffic, you hear everybody who has anything to sell or to collect has
Yeah.
a sound or a song or a bell. So when they come through the streets, they're either,
All day
you
long.
know, yelling to get in case you need your gas
Mm-hmm.
cylinders refilled, or if you have trash you want to throw away, they're ringing a bell. If you have larger things you want to give away, they're amplifying that sound and announcing it. They
Yeah.
sell tamales.
It's like any neighborhood will have the car that drives by with the radio playing loudly, right? That kind of thing. That's Mexican culture in a nutshell. They like everything as loud as it can be. When restaurants or shops set up in the morning, they'll open their doors, they sweep the street, they put out a speaker the size of a kid, and they just crank music into the street all day long. That's what businesses are here.
Mhm.
Now we have, like you said, we live in a relatively quiet area, so we're spared from most of that. But dogs barking on roofs,
Mhm.
impromptu parties at all time. Mexicans love to celebrate everything and anything and nothing. We've only seen one rooftop party near us, but it was a barn burner,
Yep.
as it would be,
Yep.
and you walk around the neighborhood, and we've walked by parties where the lights and the music are pumping out of the side of a building, and we've sort
Mhm.
of commented to each other, "Man, I'd love to be that guy's neighbor tonight." But
Mhm.
that's what this, that's part of it,
Mhm.
and it's tough for me. I'm sensitive to noise, so this one's been a real
Mhm.
a real struggle, but so far so good, right? I would,
Yep. Even so, we probably had the apartment a month, and a club opened up immediately next door to our
yeah,
apartment, and
right.
There have been some loud late nights that our neighbors have complained about, and when we haven't been there, and the police come, and I guess they've been very receptive
Right,
to
right.
not only shutting down the noise if it's late, but making sure that people leave, that they're not just shutting the noise down for 5 minutes, that they're
Yeah,
shutting it down for the night. It's been noticeable, but not terrible when
right.
we've been there, but it's another thing to be aware of for
And
sure.
they're one of those businesses, they open the windows and put a speaker in the window, and it's like, I don't know why you're doing that, but so far it hasn't been an issue. They play music throughout the day, but we can, we close the windows, we don't hear it at all. And we're able to get work done. It's fine. That's been fine, but it's one of those. That's one for me. My eye's going to be, or my ear will be on that one for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So speaking of one form of pollution, the other form of pollution we have to worry about here is number 5, which is air pollution. This is
Right.
one I think a lot of people are probably familiar with or associate with Mexico City for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I think Mexico City has made great progress in the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years on
Mm-hmm.
alleviating the air pollution. And there were days where if the pollution is getting higher, they restrict cars from the streets.
Right.
Only certain cars are allowed to drive. So it's definitely better than it was, but there are absolutely days where the air quality index is into the moderate or even the high range.
Mm-hmm.
And it's recommended that you don't exercise outdoors. And you can see it, when you're up on our balcony and you look out to the mountains, there are days after rainfall where you can see, you
Mm-hmm.
know, every building and every mountain peak. And then there are days when it hasn't rained in a little while and
It's hazy.
you can barely
Yeah.
see the mountains. So it's
It's
noticeable.
it is a gigantic mega city. It's not just a city. 22 million people. I don't know what the land area is, but it's just, I mean, it's the size of Rhode Island. It feels like it's a classic pollution issue where it's basically a bowl surrounded by mountains. And so this is a classic pollution issue. You see this in Los Angeles, Phoenix,
Mhm.
etc. But like you said, yeah, they're doing a better job. I mean, a lot of the Google stuff that we use always reports AQI, air quality index. We see
Yeah.
that on our screens. I sort of watch that. I watch the weather every day. I sort of watch the AQI. It hasn't been horrible. It's not as bad as I would have thought. We have,
Mhm.
we live in a really rural area here in Pennsylvania. We've had some high
Yeah.
AQI days, but
Yep. Mhm.
it happens everywhere, I guess.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, Another one that kind of should impact anybody, and if you don't feel entitled yet, please visit Mexico City or visit anywhere in Mexico, and what you'll see is the poverty, which is number 6, and it's I'm gonna kind of add in child labor to this part of it because there's part of the the Mexico culture where everyone is allowed to make a living, and so there's a lot of panhandling, and okay, but a lot of it's done by children,
Mhm.
which if you're from the United States or Canada or wherever, probably you might find this a little off-putting. I still struggle with this one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's hard when you're in the neighborhoods that most expats tend to live in or the downtown area, you don't quite see as much of the poverty, but certainly like driving in from the airport, you see a lot of, just rundown neighborhoods.
Like shanty town type looking
Yeah,
areas,
just it's clear that, people are kind of barely making it. And then even in the nicer areas, or especially probably because there are more people in these areas that have some money,
yeah.
you'll see, a dad playing the guitar and his son
Mm-hmm.
dancing, and his son might look to be 5 or 6 years
Yeah,
old. You'll
and
see,
singing, and
yep, you'll see families with, playing an accordion and
mm-hmm.
walking around collecting money. You'll see usually boys, standing on the shoulders of an older boy or young adult, and
Yeah,
they'll be in an intersection juggling for spare change. And
yep.
it just feels so first unsafe to have a child entertaining in a
Yeah,
traffic in an intersection while the cars
yeah.
are at the red lights, and also just something that you wouldn't see
Nope.
in the United States.
No,
People would shut it down.
no, we have tent cities and all that kind of stuff in the United States, and obviously poor areas. I mean, there's a huge gulf between the rich and the poor in the United States. That gap is much wider in Mexico.
Mhm.
And the way I think it impacts us the most is probably just we'll be out in a restaurant eating outside, and there'll be people. It could be little kids. A lot of times there'll be someone with crutches or something, and they're walking around reselling little candies or whatever it is.
Mhm.
We're still this is one we still struggle with regards to how to handle this, right? Do you send them all away? Do you always give them something?
Hmm.
We're working through that. I
Hmm.
will say I've been impressed seeing locals. You think locals would just immediately and without thought shoo these people away, but they're often invited. Show me more, and
Hmm.
I've seen people buying things I don't see any value to whatsoever,
Hmm.
and that's interesting. But
Hmm.
it's definitely part. It's part of it. It's part of the
Yeah.
experience, for sure.
If you sit outside at a restaurant, and you probably want to because it's beautiful out
Yep.
all the time, you can probably expect that 2 or 3 times during your meal,
Yeah.
somebody will come by your table, either just asking for change, or they will have played a couple songs and they're taking a collection after that, or they're selling
Yes.
something. So that's something to get used to. And it
Yeah.
is like the Mexicans, the locals do, they really engage with people. Even if they don't buy something, they'll often have a conversation. And,
Yep.
my Spanish isn't good enough to know exactly what's going on, but there's definitely, they're
You
not
can,
just
yeah,
dismissing these
they're
people out of
following
hand.
up on it. What, show me more.
Hmm.
To me, that's very interesting.
Hmm.
In the United States, I would think the reaction to this would be outwardly negative all of
Yes.
the time.
Yes.
Okay, so number 7, I believe, is traffic.
Hmm. Yeah. Traffic is really bad in Mexico City
Hmm.
often. We don't have to, we don't have to commute to a job in Mexico City, so we're not facing it in that kind of way. But there are definitely times where we'll step out of the apartment and there's, a street just full of cars.
Yeah,
Times when some place that we want to go is 20 or 30 minutes away or less, and it's as fast or faster to walk
to
there
walk.
as
Yeah,
it would be to take
yeah,
an Uber. Um,
yep.
so it's definitely something to consider. I wouldn't say it's a huge, huge problem for us, but it's definitely
Mm-mm.
something to be aware of. If you think you're going to be someplace at a certain time, you
You want
probably
to
want to
you
give
want to
in
look at it in
extra
advance and just,
time.
yeah, see what
Yeah.
it's going to be. So we are probably 7 minutes ish from a metro station, so we can take the train as well, depending on where we're going, which is great. Um, Honestly, it's worked. It's been pretty good. And where it matters the most, where I'd be the most stressed about it, is going to and from the airport when you arrive or when you're going home, especially if it's 4:30 in
Mm.
the morning or whatever. And there's never traffic
No,
to and from
no.
the airport ever. It's
Hmm.
that's or so far. I mean, we've done that trip many times now, so
Hmm.
that's always been great.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's good. I told a little story about number 8 months ago, we, but anyway, but number 8 is, and this is on the blog if you want to read that little story, but it's earthquakes, right, which is a
Hmm.
concern in
Right.
Mexico City for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So the story that's on the blog, we experienced one earthquake. I
Hmm.
didn't actually feel it. We were in a car
Yeah,
at the time, so I didn't notice anything, but it happened while we were there. It's definitely going to happen again while we're there. It's
yeah,
actually kind of funny when our building is built to, hopefully withstand earthquakes.
sure.
When trucks go by, you do feel like a light shaking, which is a little off-putting. I have Googled, did an
Because it's
earthquake just
designed
happen in Mexico
to give a
City?
little bit.
Hmm.
The more rigid the thing is, the more likely it will collapse.
Hmm.
And I don't know anything about architecture,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're designed for this. This is the purpose is,
Hmm.
you're going to build
I
here.
am a little bit nervous about my first
Yep,
noticeable
me too.
earthquake and how I will react to that. So,
There have been times I wonder if we haven't experienced other earthquakes. Like you said, we feel it from a truck a little bit sometimes. Every once in a while, we've had these moments where I said, "Are you feeling kind of a little swaying there?" And maybe that's a little tiny earthquake. I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see. The one thing I noticed on our most recent trip, I hadn't really sort of regarded before, where they have these points you go to when there is an earthquake. So you're not supposed to be inside. You're
Hmm.
supposed to go outside and be as far from a building as you can be. You want to be kind of out in the middle. So they actually draw circles everywhere. And on the last trip, I said, well, what are these circles doing? This is, and they're for earthquakes. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, we'll see. Cross your fingers or whatever on that one. All right. So number 9 is this is kind of a tough one because it varies by area, but it's the quality of the sidewalks and the streets. Um, in Roma Norte, I always feel bad for guys that are coming or going with an Uber because they have to weave down the street, as if it had just been bombed or something. There are huge craters and potholes and problems. And then where we are, like right on our corners, sidewalks are beautiful. They just did them
Mhm.
over. They're nice and straight, but man, that's not the case. It's not the
No,
case everywhere for sure.
no. And it's not the case a lot of places if there's the sidewalk is in between somebody's garage and the street. If the
Hmm.
garage is, elevated, there's going to be like a dip on each side of the sidewalk so
Right.
the cars can get in and out of the garage. And um, tree roots growing up through the sidewalk.
Oh yeah.
You definitely really want to keep an eye on your feet when you're walking around on the sidewalks.
Yep.
Not wheelchair friendly. They're fixing the sidewalks, and where they're fixed, they
They're
are putting the
beautiful.
curb cutouts, and they're
Yeah.
nice. But you
No,
have to
this is
kind
an
of
issue.
plan to not go too far.
I could walk from here to the garage and probably bump into a door frame somewhere, you know, and this place is all perfectly level and it's fine. But I
Mhm.
walk around Mexico City sometimes and you find yourself trying to figure it,
Yeah.
you bump it's just awkward bumps everywhere and
Mhm.
holes, sometimes some outright holes. I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
they'll just throw a cone down. Sometimes they won't even throw a cone down. There'll just be a
Sometimes they'll
hole.
fill a hole with bricks.
Yeah, which happened outside of our driveway there,
Yep.
which is ridiculous.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, that will vary, but
Mhm.
there you go. That's one of the reasons we don't want to rent bikes, by the way, just to own our own bikes there to drive around normally, because I don't, well, it's part of the reason I wouldn't trust the streets.
Mhm.
The other reason
Yeah.
is the people driving on the streets. I wouldn't trust them either.
Right.
But, but the streets are tough.
Mhm.
All
Yep.
right. So number 10 is language. So we talked earlier about how Spanish is easier than some languages for sure.
Mhm.
It's still a separate language.
Still not English.
Yeah, right. We're still in our 50s too. So
Yeah.
yeah, these things don't come as quick maybe as they would when you were younger.
Yeah. And I will say the Spanish people are very, or the Mexican people, at least that we've encountered in, restaurants, stores,
Hmm.
whatever, super accommodating, try really hard to
Oh yeah.
understand you. Um, but there's not a level of English spoken like you would see in, Paris or some of the other big European cities in the tourist areas.
Well, remember, we're not in the tourist area. So, I mean, we
Mhm.
are sort of, I guess. Obviously, there's a lot of expats there, but I think it depends on where you are. I don't think you have to go too far in Mexico City to find a lack of English for sure.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the easiest way to say it maybe is just there's a lot less of it
Yes.
per capita or however you want to say it for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. And when you are, spending more time in Mexico City like we are, and you're,
Mhm.
if whether you're renting or your own, if you have people coming to your house to do, we have decent restaurant Spanish. We can
Mhm.
order off a menu. We, might need to use Google Translate a little bit for some ingredients or something, but we can manage most restaurant and store interactions. But
Right.
when somebody comes to your house and they're trying to fix the water
Mhm.
heater or installing a balcony floor or, you know,
Yeah.
doing things and you don't have the language for that, it's hard. And you can use Google Translate,
Mhm.
but that only gets you so far. I've been studying Spanish a lot, so I would say I still have a long way to go, but that's a big time
But you've been
commitment.
doing
I'm
it, and I
trying to
think
take like 2 hours of a lesson a week, plus
yeah,
trying to build vocabulary with an app. So
most people
it's a time commitment.
most people assume they'll just get there and they'll be immersed and that will be enough, and that will help. There's no doubt about it. But I would not feel comfortable not knowing the basics before that happened. And I'm behind you obviously by a lot, but menu Spanish is fine. I think
Mhm.
that's been fine. So as we spend more time there, that's going to have to improve.
Mhm. And you just want to be able to have conversations with people,
Yep.
like
Yep.
we're waiting for an Uber one day and there's another guy out there doing his job, and you can't really
Hmm.
make small talk because we don't have enough
Well,
language or,
yeah, and that guy you're referring to is the guy who initially showed us our apartment, Morrow,
yes.
and when we Mauricio, excuse me, when we did our signing, they asked us about the experience we'd had, and I wanted to make sure that they understood that this guy was fantastic and did such a great job, a really nice guy. And he's been outside. They're still trying to sell a couple of the apartments, so he's sitting out there with his umbrella and his little table and everything, and we can't really talk to him.
Mhm.
He doesn't speak English. So.
Right.
Okay, so that is 10 reasons why Mexico may not be for you, or that some of the negatives for us. But there's kind of an 11th, and this is maybe a personal pet peeve for me, and I guess for us as well, which is that a lot of people we know, friends, family, have been watching us over the years. They know how we've traveled, what we've been doing. They've made assumptions about where we're going to end up. Those assumptions are reasonable. We thought the same thing. Maybe we'd be splitting our time in France, Paris, especially, or Spain, or somewhere else, Portugal, whatever. We went to Mexico, and I think a lot of people are like, wait, what? you know, but if the decision had come down to between, say Portugal and Spain, or Spain and France, I think people would have been interested, but they would have understood. Whatever, you have your reasons. That's fine. But when you say the answer is Mexico, they're like, well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. I've seen Sicario. I watched Narcos, right? I know that this place is a narco hellhole. What are you doing? That's scary. Like, isn't that dangerous for you? Isn't it unsafe? And there's a lot of misinformation that we deal with, and that's the misconception part of it is what we're kind of talking about. It's hard, and it's hard because you talk at length about what you're doing. You explain it. We make these videos. We explain ourselves, and I'll have friends and nodding their heads and yep. Oh, no, it sounds great. But then they'll say, but seriously, is it safe? And I said, we just joked about this. Do you think I'm going to a place that's unsafe? Do you really think that?
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, I think it's hard because, we, or at least I had the same misconceptions
we did
going
into
this,
we all did. Yeah. Yep.
There's narcos and kidnappings and gunfire and general lack of safety. And, then you get there and you realize that that's kind of what's portrayed in media and news in the United States. And it's not the case in Mexico City.
No, and especially not where we are. It's a big city. There are bad areas. There are bad areas in every big city, right? And we're going to avoid those for sure. But as far as the stereotypical things that people think are wrong about Mexico, and it's funny, the misconceptions range too. The types that bother us are the safety issue things, the narco stuff, whatever it might be. That bothers me. It shouldn't. I like you said, we had the same misconceptions ourselves. You do a little bit of research, and that's the whole point of our story in a way, that I came to you that day and said, this is going to sound crazy, because I actually looked into it and it's not what people describe. But there are other misconceptions too. I mean, people don't understand Mexico City, the altitude, the interior of the country. They don't understand how diverse it is. They assume it's a hot, humid, beachy place. That's Mexico in most people's minds. And those parts exist, of course. But it has nothing to do with where we are. We talked about climate before, and people say, oh, it must be really hot because you're going out there in August. No, it's not. In fact, it was cooler in August than it was in March. It's a different place, and it's not what most Americans, especially Westerners, I don't know how to say it, Europeans, Canadians, Americans, whatever you are. I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there. And, I try to be understanding, because like you said, we had them too.
Right.
But this is like anything else in life. The more you learn, you realize it's maybe, a little more nuanced.
Right.
Or in this case, completely different.
Yeah, completely different. Sure.
Yeah.
And I think just to go back to the whole list, I mean, these are all negatives or cons to living or visiting Mexico City in particular. We've done our list of the pros. In my mind, and probably yours, the pros far outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
But we're not going into this thing with rose-colored glasses and, everything's perfect all the time. There's definitely, upsides and downsides. And I think it's fair to walk through the downsides as well.
When we first visited Mexico over a year ago on our very first trip, I had these things in my head. I'm watching for this, right? And those things were noise, primarily, air pollution, that aspect of it. And just I'm going to throw poverty in there, not because I thought of poverty especially, but I didn't think Mexico City would live up to the greatest cities on earth, the Parises, Londons, whatever you hold up there. And I was honestly surprised on all accounts. There is noise. It's a big city. There's going to be some noise, right? There's obviously air pollution, but like you said, they're doing an incredible job. And there are parts of the city that I think rival anything you would see in any of the world's greatest cities. I think it is one of the world's greatest cities. And the thing I feel bad the most about, and it's tied to this misconception thing, is that I didn't know this sooner. It's
Mhm.
just ignorance on my part. I feel bad about that. We might have done things differently in life sooner or whatever,
Mhm.
had we known this was here. And it's right there. It's too bad.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, anywho, that's our 10, or I guess 11
Mhm.
reasons why Mexico might not be for you or for us or whatever. But like Stephanie said, I think most of these things are bearable, surmountable. They're not
Yep.
reason enough not to just to say no, for sure.
Sure.
So
Mhm.
if this is the worst you got, Mexico, we'll
We're
take
all in.
it. Yeah, well, we're all in either way. So anyway, thank you for watching, and we will be back soon with another video.